What follows are excerpts from the book Islamic Revival in British India, Deoband, 1860 to 1900, by Barbara Daly Metcalf. Given Barbara's sympathetic treatment of the earlier history of Deoband, and given the historical connections between Deoband and the emergence of the Taliban in Afghanistan in the 1990s, Barbara's work has taken on a new significance, as reflected in the reissue of a Deoband book. Barbara has been extremely active in speaking publicly about the importance of South Asia's Islamic history in framing recent events. She has made clear that sweeping generalizations about the ulama and about the historical influence of Deoband itself are highly problematic. Deobandi influence has expressed itself in markedly different ways in different political and social contexts, in India, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, and in the broader Muslim world as a whole, as recent events have shown. The complexity of the Deobandi legacy is evident in her recent biography of Maulana Hussain Ahmad Madani, one of the leaders of the Deobandi tradition who fought for the economic betterment of Muslims and who opposed the creation of Pakistan as a separate Muslim state in 1947. But as Madani's life also makes clear, the lives of the ulama in the early 20th century have considerable relevance for understanding contemporary politics. Madani was radicalized during his long imprisonment on the island of Malta in the name of British colonial security, an episode central to Barbara's analysis of his life. His story, as Barbara has forcefully pointed out, thus has considerable relevance for thinking about today's quote-unquote war on terror and the history of Guantanamo. The ulama of this period have not been much studied because their activities were relatively inconspicuous. They have indeed been dismissed as an isolated quote-unquote underworld, relics of a traditional, unchanging past. In fact, significant groups among them were committed to religious renewal and moral purification using both new institutional forms and modern technological devices. Their style of religious belief has come to be increasingly characteristic of the Muslims of South Asia and indeed of all Muslims. In this period, the ulama chose a strategy turning within, eschewing for the time all concern with the organization of the state and relations with other communities. Their sole concern was to preserve the religious heritage, the classic role of the ulama from the post-Abbasid centuries on, and to disseminate instructions and authentic religious practice and belief. They sought to be and to create in others personalities that embodied Islam. To this end, they preached and wrote, offered advisory legal opinions, and acted as spiritual guides to their followers. Their form of organization and the techniques of communication were new. The broad-based audience was new, and their emphasis within their religion and their consciousness of it were new in their time. The religion was not traditional in the sense of being accepted without question. Rather, it was self-conscious, formulated often against the peers of the Sufi shrines, against other Muslim ulama, and against non-Muslims, both Indian and British. One hears most of the religious movements of the late 19th century that were modernist or syncretist, but far more characteristic with those that worked within the repertoire of received beliefs, were always shifting emphasis, reformulating and redefining. Indeed, if any single label were to be put on religious change in this period, it could be that of quote-unquote rationalizing in the Western sense of making religion self-conscious, systematic, and based on abstract principles. It made possible the sharing of religious universals with Muslims of varied geographic backgrounds at the cost of parochial cults. Such was the context that directed some Muslims to a rediscovery of their faith. The reformist ulama, of whom the most important group is that associated with the Theological Academy founded in the town of Deoband in 1867. The late 19th century ulama of Deoband had a clear and coherent view of the way the world was and the way one ought to live within it. A view, one need hardly add, radically different from that of the imperial administrators who, by and large, little dreamed how irrelevant such notions of progress and constitutional government and European superiority would remain to many of their subjects. In describing the ulama, I hope to present something of Islamic reality and, in so doing, not only to contribute to an important and unstudied dimension of modern Indian Islamic history, but also to suggest that the religious conceptions of jihad and tajdeed provide a useful entry for understanding significant dimensions of Muslim history.